The room was heavy with silence, the kind that presses against your chest and makes it hard to breathe. The mahogany table gleamed under the chandelier, polished so perfectly it reflected the tense faces sitting around it. My son, Daniel, sat straight-backed, his jaw tight, fingers drumming impatiently on the armrest of his chair. He hadn't shed a single tear since his father's funeral 3 days earlier. I watched him carefully. I had known Daniel for 35 years. I had raised him, protected him, forgiven him more times than I could count. But the man sitting across from me that day felt like a stranger. "Let's not waste time," Daniel finally said, breaking the silence. "Dad built a $40 million empire. Everyone here knows it belongs to me." The lawyer, Mr. Havorson, adjusted his glasses but said nothing yet. My hands trembled slightly in my lap. I folded them together, steadying myself. This wasn't supposed to happen like this. Not today. "Daniel," I said quietly, "your father hasn't even been laid to rest properly. This is. This is exactly the time," he snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Dad always said everything he built was for his family. I'm his only son. Who else would it go to?" Around the table sat a few distant relatives, business partners, and family friends. No one spoke. They had all seen the change in Daniel over the years, the entitlement, the impatience, the way he treated his father like a walking bank account rather than a man. My husband, Robert, had started with nothing. He grew up poor, worked 3 jobs through college, and built his company from a dusty garage with borrowed tools. For decades, he poured his life into it. Missed birthdays, late nights, endless stress. Also, Daniel could have opportunities he never did. But Daniel never seemed satisfied. When Robert fell ill 2 years ago, Daniel rarely visited. He was too busy. When Robert needed help managing the company, Daniel demanded control without learning the business. And when Robert refused, saying, "You haven't earned it yet," something dark settled in Daniel's eyes. Still, Robert loved him, deeply, painfully. The day before Robert died, I sat beside his hospital bed, holding his frail hand. His breathing was shallow, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Promise me," he said, squeezing my fingers weakly. "Promise me you'll let the will speak for me." I didn't understand then. I only nodded, tears sliding down my cheeks. Back in the lawyer's office, Mr. Havorson finally cleared his throat. "If everyone is ready," he said, "I will begin reading Robert Whitman's last will and testament." Daniel leaned forward eagerly. The first few pages were predictable. Donations to charities Robert supported, education funds, veterans' hospitals, small business grants. Daniel rolled his eyes, visibly irritated. "Get to the important part," he muttered. I felt my stomach knot. Mr. Havorson turned the page. "To my wife, Eleanor," he read, "I leave our family home, all personal belongings, and controlling authority over the Whitman Trust." Daniel froze. "What?" he said sharply. "Controlling authority." "Yes," the lawyer continued calmly. "Mrs. Whitman will serve as sole trustee." Daniel's face flushed red. "That's ridiculous. She doesn't run the company, I do." "You worked there briefly," Mr. Havorson corrected gently. I said nothing. My heart pounded in my ears. The lawyer went on, "To my son, Daniel Whitman." Daniel's lips curled into a smug smile. He leaned back, confident now. "I leave the sum of $1. The room exploded. $1. Daniel shot to his feet, his chair crashing backward. "This is a joke. That's impossible." "It is not a joke," Mr. Havorson replied evenly. "Your father was very specific." Daniel turned toward me, his eyes blazing. "You did this. You manipulated him." I slowly stood, my legs weak but my voice steady. "No, Daniel, your father made his choices." "This isn't fair," he shouted. "I'm his blood. That money is mine." Mr. Havorson raised his hand. "Please sit. There is more." Daniel hesitated, then dropped back into his chair, breathing hard. The lawyer continued reading. The remainder of my estate, including ownership shares valued at approximately $40 million, shall be placed into the Whitman Trust. Distributions shall be made under the following conditions." The room went silent again. "First," Mr. Havorson read, "Daniel Whitman shall receive no direct inheritance until he demonstrates humility, responsibility, and respect for others." Daniel laughed bitterly. "And who decides that?" "My wife," the lawyer read, "as trustee." Daniel slammed his fist on the table. "Unbelievable." "There are additional conditions," Mr. Havorson continued. "Daniel must work for a minimum of 5 consecutive years in a non-executive role, earn his income independently, and complete at least 1 year of volunteer service with organizations aiding the less fortunate." Daniel shook his head in disbelief. "This is insane." "And finally," Mr. Havorson read, his voice firm, "if Daniel contests this will or harasses the trustee, he forfeits all future claims permanently." The weight of Robert's words settled over the room like a storm cloud. Daniel stared at the table, silent now. For the first time he looked small. I remembered all the nights Robert came home exhausted, only to find Daniel demanding more money, more freedom, more power. I remembered Robert staring out the window afterward, whispering, "I failed him somehow." The meeting ended abruptly. Daniel stormed out without looking back. Weeks passed. Daniel tried everything: legal threats, guilt, manipulation. When that didn't work, he disappeared. For the first time in his life, there was no safety net waiting. Months later, I received a letter. It wasn't angry, it wasn't demanding. It was quiet. Daniel wrote about working construction, about aching muscles, about how his coworkers didn't care who his father was, about volunteering at a shelter and meeting people who had lost everything and still smiled. "I never understood what Dad went through," he wrote. "I thought money was love. I was wrong." Tears blurred my vision as I read. 2 years later, Daniel came to visit. He looked different, older, somehow humbler. He hugged me without asking for anything. "I don't want the money," he said softly. "I just want to be someone Dad wouldn't be ashamed of." That night I sat alone and opened Robert's final letter to me, sealed separately. "You'll know when the time is right," he had written. "Not when he demands it, but when he earns it." I looked out the window, imagining Robert beside me, and for the first time since his death I smiled. Because the greatest inheritance he left our son wasn't $40 million. It was a second chance.